It began on an ominous note when the former Grand Maester Orwyle was discovered in a brothel called Mother's, near the lower end of the Street of Silk. Shorn of his hair and beard and chain of office and going by the name Old Wyl, he had earned his bread by sweeping, scrubbing, inspecting patrons of the house for pox, and mixing moon tea and potions of tansy and pennyroyal for mothers, daughters, to rid themselves of unwanted children. No one paid Old Wyl any mind until he took it upon himself to teach some of Mother's younger girls to read. One of his pupils demonstrated her new skill to a sergeant in the gold cloaks, who grew suspicious and led the old man in for questioning. The truth soon emerged. The penalty for deserting the Night's Watch is death. Though Orwyle had not yet sworn vows, most still considered him an oathbreaker. There was no question of allowing him to take ship for the Wall. The original sentence of death that Lord Stark had pronounced on him must apply, the regents agreed. Sir Tyland did not deny this, though he pointed out that the office of King's Justice had yet to be filled, and as a blind man he was a poor choice to swing the sword himself. Using that for his pretext, the Hand instead confined Orwyle to a tower cell large, airy, and far too comfortable, some charged until such time as a suitable headsman can be found. Neither Septon Eustace nor Mushroom were deceived. Orwyle had served with Sir Tyland on Aegon the Two Ends Green Councils, and plainly old friendship and the memory of all they had endured played some part in the Hand's decision. The former Grand Maester was even provided with quill, ink, and parchment, so that he might continue his confessions. And so he did for the best part of 2 years, setting down the lengthy history of the reigns of Viserys I and Aegon II that would later prove to be such an invaluable source for his successor's truth-telling. Less than a fortnight later, reports reached King's Landing of bands of wildlings from the Mountains of the Moon descending upon the Vale of Arryn in large numbers to raid and plunder, and Lady Jane Arryn left the court and sailed for Gulltown to see to the defense of her own lands and people. There were ominous stirrings along the Dornish marches too, for Dorne had a new ruler in the person of Alliandra Martell, a brazen girl of 10 and 7 who fancied herself the new Nymeria, and had every young lord south of the Red Mountains vying for her affections. To deal with their incursions, Lord Caron took his leave of King's Landing as well, hastening back to Nightsong in the Dornish marches. Thus the 7 regents became 5. The most influential of those was plainly the Sea Snake, whose wealth, experience, and alliances made him the first amongst equals. Even more tellingly, he seemed the only man the young king was willing to trust. For all these reasons, the realm suffered a terrible blow on the 6th day of the 3rd moon of 132 AC, when Corlys Velaryon, Lord of the Tides, collapsed whilst ascending the serpentine steps in the Red Keep of King's Landing. By the time Grand Maester Munkin came rushing to his aid, the Sea Snake was dead. 79 years of age, he had served 4 kings and a queen, sailed to the ends of the earth, raised House Velaryon to unprecedented levels of wealth and power, married a princess who might have been a queen, fathered dragonriders, built towns and fleets, proved his valor in times of war and his wisdom in times of peace. The 7 kingdoms would never see his like again. With his passing, a great hole was torn in the tattered fabric of the 7 kingdoms. Lord Corlys lay in state beneath the Iron Throne for 7 days. Afterward his remains were carried back to Driftmark aboard the Mermaid's Kiss, captained by Marilda of Hull with her son Alan. There the battered hull of the ancient Sea Snake was floated once again and towed out into the deep waters east of Dragonstone, where Corlys Velaryon was buried at sea aboard the very ship that had given him his name. It was said afterward that as the hull went down, the cannibal swept overhead, his great black wings spread in a last salute. A moving touch, but most likely a later embroidery. From all we know of the cannibal, he would have been more apt to eat the corpse than salute it. The baseborn Alan of Hull, now Alan Velaryon, had been the Sea Snake's chosen heir, but his succession was not uncontested. It will be recalled that in the time of King Viserys, a nephew of Lord Corlys, Sir Vaemond Velaryon, had put himself forward as the true heir to Driftmark. This rebellion cost him his head, but he left a wife and sons behind. Sir Vaemond had been the son of the elder of the Sea Snake's brothers. 5 other nephews, sired by another brother, had claims as well. When they took their case before the sick and failing Viserys, they made the grievous mistake of questioning the legitimacy of his daughter's children. Viserys had their tongues removed for this insolence, though he let them keep their heads. 3 of the silent 5 had died during the dance, fighting for Aegon II against Rhaenyra. But 2 survived, together with Sir Vaemond's sons, and all came forward now, insisting that they had more right to Driftmark than this bastard of Hull, whose mother was a mouse. Sir Vaemond's sons Demian and Daron took their claim to the council in King's Landing. When the Hand and the Regents ruled against them, they wisely chose to accept the decision and be reconciled with Lord Alan, who rewarded them with lands on Driftmark on the condition that they contribute ships to his fleet. Their silent cousins chose a different course. Lacking tongues with which to make their appeal, they preferred to argue with swords, says Mushroom. However, the plot to murder their young lord went awry when the guards at Castle Driftmark proved loyal to the Sea Snake's memory and his chosen heir. Sir Malentine was slain during the attempt, his brother captured. Condemned to death, Sir Rogar saved his head by taking the black. Alan Valerion, the bastard born of Mouse, was formally installed as Lord of the Tides and Master of Driftmark. Whereupon he set out for King's Landing to claim the Sea Snake's place amongst the regents. Even as a boy, Lord Alan never lacked for boldness. The Hand thanked him and sent him home, understandably, as Alan Valerion was but 16 in 132 AC. Lord Corlys's seat upon the Council of Regents had already been offered to an older and more seasoned man, Onwyn Peake, Lord of Starpike, Lord of Dunstanbury, Lord of Whitegrove. Sir Tyland had a far more pressing concern in 132 AC, the matter of succession. Whilst Lord Corlys had been old and frail, his sudden death had nonetheless served as a grim reminder that any man could die at any time, even seemingly healthy young kings like Aegon III. War, illness, accident, there were so many ways to die, and if the king should perish, who then would follow him? If he dies without an heir, we shall dance again, however much we may mislike the music, Lord Manfred Muden warned his fellow regents. Queen Jaehaera's claim was as strong as the king's, and stronger in the minds of some, but the notion of placing that sweet, simple, frightened child on the Iron Throne was madness, all agreed. King Aegon himself, when asked, put forward his cupbearer, Daemon Palehair, reminding the regents that the boy had been a king before. That was impossible as well. In truth, there were only two claimants the realm was like to accept, the king's half-sisters. Baela and Rhaena Targaryen, Prince Daemon's twin daughters by his first wife, Lady Laena Valerion. The girls were now 16 years of age, tall and slim and silver-haired, very much the darlings of the city. King Aegon seldom set foot outside the Red Keep after his coronation, and his little queen never left her own apartments, so for most of the past year, it had been Rhaena or Baela riding out to hunt or hawk, giving alms to the poor, receiving envoys and visiting lords with the king's hand, serving as hostess at feasts, of which there were few, masks, and balls, of which there had been none as yet. The twins were the only Targaryens the people ever saw. Yet even here, the council encountered difficulty and division. When Leowen Corbray said, Lady Rhaena would make a splendid queen, Sir Tyland pointed out that Baela had been the first from her mother's womb. Baela is too wild, countered Sir Torrhen Manderley. How can she rule the realm when she cannot rule herself? Sir Willis Fell agreed. It must be Rhaena. She has a dragon, her sister does not. When Lord Corbray answered, Baela flew a dragon, Rhaena only has the hatchling, Roland Westerling replied, Baela's dragon brought down our late king. There are many in the realm who will not have forgotten that. Crown her and we will rip all the old wounds open once again. Yet it was Grand Maester Munkin who put an end to the debate when he said, My lords, it makes no matter. They are both girls. Have we learned so little from the slaughter? We must abide by primogeniture, as the Great Council ruled in 101. The male claim comes before the female. Yet when Sir Tyland said, And who is this male claimant, my lord? We seem to have killed them all, Munkin had no answer but to say he would research the issue. Thus the crucial question of succession remained unsettled. This uncertainty did little to spare the twins from the fawning attentions of all the suitors, confidants, companions, and similar flatterers eager to befriend the king's presumed heirs, though the sisters reacted to these lickspittles in vastly different ways. Where Rhaena delighted in being the center of court life, Baela bristled at praise, and seemed to take pleasure in mocking and tormenting the suitors who fluttered around her like moths. As young girls, the twins had been inseparable, and impossible to tell apart, but once parted, their experiences had shaped them in very different ways. In the Vale, Rhaena had enjoyed a life of comfort and privilege as Lady Jane's ward. Maids had brushed her hair and drawn her baths, whilst singers composed odes to her beauty and knights jousted for her favor. The same was true at King's Landing, where dozens of gallant young lords competed for her smiles, artists begged leave to draw or paint her, and the city's finest dressmakers sought the honor of making her gowns. And everywhere that Rhaena went came mourning, her young dragon, oft as not coiled about her shoulders like a stole. Baela's time on Dragonstone had been more troubled, ending with fire and blood. By the time she came to court, she was as wild and willful a young woman as any in the realm. Rhaena was slender and graceful, Baela was lean and quick. Rhaena loved to dance, Baela lived to ride. And to fly, though that had been taken from her when her dragon died. She kept her silver hair cropped as short as a boy's, so it would not whip about her face when she was riding. Time and time again she would escape her ladies to seek adventure in the streets. She took part in drunken horse races along the Street of the Sisters, engaged in moonlight swims across the Blackwater Rush, whose powerful currents had been known to drown many a strong swimmer, drank with the gold cloaks in their barracks, wagered coin and sometimes clothing in the rat pits of Flea Bottom. Once she vanished for 3 days and refused to say where she had been when she returned. Even more gravely, Baela had a taste for unsuitable companions. Like stray dogs, she brought them home with her to the Red Keep, insisting that they be given positions in the castle, or be made part of her own retinue. These pets of hers included a comely young juggler, a blacksmith's apprentice whose muscles she admired, a legless beggar she took pity on, a conjurer of cheap tricks she took for an actual sorcerer, a hedge knight's homely squire, even a pair of young girls from a brothel, twins, Lycus, Ray. Once she turned up with an entire troop of mummers. Septa Amaris, who had been given charge of her religious and moral instruction, despaired of her, and even Septon Eustace could not seem to curb her wild ways. The girl must be wed, and soon, he told the king's hand, else I fear that she may bring dishonor down upon House Targaryen, and shame his grace, her brother. Sir Tylan saw the sense in the Septon's counsel. But there were perils as well. Baela did not lack for suitors. She was young, beautiful, healthy, wealthy, and of the highest birth. Any lord in the Seven Kingdoms would be glad to take her for his wife. Yet the wrong choice could have grave consequences, for her husband would stand very close to the throne. An unscrupulous, venal, or overly ambitious mate might cause no end of war and woe. A score of possible candidates for Lady Baela's hand were considered by the regents. Lord Tully, Lord Blackwood, Lord Hightower, as yet unwed, though he had taken his father's widow as a paramour, were all put forth, as were a number of less likely choices, including Dalton Greyjoy. The Red Kraken boasted of having 100 salt wives, but had never taken a rock wife, a younger brother of the Princess of Dorne, and even that rogue Racleo Rindoon. All of them were ultimately discarded for one reason or another. Finally the Hand and the Council of Regency decided to grant Lady Baela's hand in marriage to Thaddeus Rowan, Lord of Goldengrove. Rowan was no doubt a prudent choice. His second wife had died the year previous, and he was known to be seeking a suitable young maid to take her place. His virility was beyond question. He had fathered 2 sons on his first wife, and 5 more on his second. As he had no daughters, Baela would be the unquestioned mistress of his castle. His 4 youngest sons were still at home, and in need of a woman's hand. The fact that all Lord Rowan's offspring were male counted heavily in his favor. If he were to sire a son on Lady Baela, Aegon III would have a clear successor. Lord Thaddeus was a bluff, hearty, cheerful man, well-liked and well-respected, a doting husband and a good father to his sons. He had fought for Queen Rhaenyra during the dance, and had done so ably and with valor. He was proud without being arrogant, just in judgment but not vindictive, loyal to his friends, dutiful in religious matters without being excessively pious, untroubled by overweening ambition. Should the throne pass to Lady Baela, Lord Rowan would make the perfect consort, supporting her with all his strength and wisdom without seeking to dominate her or usurp her rightful place as ruler. Septon Eustace tells us that the regents were very pleased with the result of their deliberations. Baela Targaryen, when informed of the match, did not share their pleasure. Lord Rowan is 40 years my senior, bald as a stone, with a belly that weighs more than I do, she purportedly told the king's hand. Then she added, I've bedded 2 of his sons. The eldest and third born, I think it was. Not both at once, that would have been improper. Whether there is any truth to this we cannot say. Lady Baela was known to be deliberately provocative at times. If that was her purpose here, she was successful. The Hand sent her back to her rooms, posting guards at her door to make certain she remained there until the regents could convene. Yet a day later, he discovered to his dismay that Baela had fled the castle by some secret means. Later it was found she had climbed out a window, swapped clothes with a washerwoman, and walked out the front gate. By the time the hue and cry went up, she was halfway across Blackwater Bay, having hired a fisherman to carry her to Driftmark. There she sought out her cousin, the Lord of the Tides, and poured out her woes to him. A fortnight later, Alan Valerion and Baela Targaryen were married in the Sept on Dragonstone. The bride was 16, the groom nearly 17. Several of the regents, outraged, urged Sir Tylan to appeal to the High Septon for an annulment, but the Hand's own response was one of bemused resignation. Prudently, he had it put about that the marriage had been arranged by king and court, believing that it was Lady Baela's defiance that was the scandal rather than her choice of spouse. The boy comes from noble blood, he assured the regents, and I do not doubt that he will prove as loyal as his brother. Thaddeus Rowan's wounded pride was appeased by a betrothal to Floris Baratheon, a maid of 14 years widely considered to be the prettiest of the four storms, as Lord Boros's 4 daughters had become known. In her case, it was a misnomer. A sweet girl, if somewhat frivolous, she was to die in childbed 2 years later. The stormy marriage would prove to be the one made on Dragonstone, as the years would prove. For the Hand and Council of Regents, Baela Targaryen's midnight flight across Blackwater Bay had confirmed all their doubts about her. The girl is wild, willful, and wanton, as we feared, Sir Willis Fell declared mournfully, and now she has tied herself to Lord Corlys's upjumped bastard. A snake for a sire, a mouse for a mother, is this to be our prince consort? The regents were in agreement, Baela Targaryen could not be King Aegon's heir. It must be Lady Rhaena, declared Mutin, provided she is wed. This time, at Sir Tylan's insistence, the girl herself was made a part of the discussions. Lady Rhaena proved to be as tractable as her sister had been willful. She would of course wed whomever the king and council wished, she allowed, though, it would please me if he was not so old he could not give me children, nor so fat that he would crush me when we are abed. So long as he is kind and gentle and noble, I know that I shall love him. When the Hand asked if she had any favorites amongst the lords and knights who had paid her suit, she confessed that she was especially fond of Sir Corwin Corbray, whom she had first met in the Vale whilst a ward of Lady Arryn. Sir Corwin was far from an ideal choice. A second son, he had 2 daughters from a previous marriage. At 32, he was a man, not a green boy. Yet House Corbray was ancient and honorable, Sir Corwin a knight of such repute that his late father had given him Lady Forlorn, the Valyrian steel blade of the Corbrays. His brother Leowyn was the protector of the realm. That alone would have made it difficult for the regents to raise objection. And so the match was made, a quick betrothal, followed by a hasty wedding a fortnight later. The Hand would have preferred a longer betrothal, but the regents felt it prudent for Rhaena to wed quickly, in the event that her sister was already with child. The twins were not the only ladies of the realm to wed in 132 AC. Later that same year, Benjicot Blackwood, Lord of Raventry, led a retinue up the King's Road to Winterfell, to stand witness at the marriage of his aunt Alysanne to Lord Cregan Stark. With the north already in the grip of winter, the journey took thrice as long as expected. Half the riders lost their horses as the column struggled through howling snowstorms, and thrice Lord Blackwood's carts were attacked by bands of outlaws, who carried off much of the column's food and all the wedding gifts. The wedding itself was said to be splendid, however, Black Ally and her wolf pledged their troth before the heart tree in Winterfell's icy godswood. At the feast afterward, 4-year-old Rickon, Lord Cregan's son by his first wife, sang a song for his new stepmother.